Jamie. Dana Carroll was just a baby. So I really stayed close to Carolyn and with you all and lived with you, y'all for quite a while.
I remember.
Then I did go back and finish my schooling. And then I came back and then bought a home up on Mary Ellen and got my life together with the help of Carolyn and, and the kids. You and Dana.
I want to get to Papa and your life with him in just a few minutes. Before that, though, I think I want to take a break and wet my whistle and let you rest a minute.
Okay.
All right, we're back again. After H.O.'s death, you moved to Pampa, and in Pampa, you met another man who was to come into become a very big part of your life. How did you meet Papa? And when I say Papa, I'm talking about J.M. Chubb Morris.
Yeah, the one that you adore.
Right.
Ronnie, it was real funny how I met your Papa. I went to beauty school after Papa. I was always real good with hair. So I decided I'd go to beauty school because I figured I needed that. So I went to beauty school and got a beauty course. I came back and I was working in a beauty shop, and Carolyn was very protective of her mother. She really was. She thought her mother really, shouldn't make the hot spots like the beer joints and all that stuff. But anyway, I was sitting, a bunch of us beauty operators had worked late that night, and we were sitting in the Blue Bonnets.
Pampa, Texas.
In Pampa, Texas. And it was really, it wasn't a bad place, really. But like I say, Carolyn was so protective of her mother. She was an only child. But anyway, we were sitting there, and here comes this big guy. I had been going with another guy, that Shell Oil Company lawyer. And here I was sitting down there in my uniform with these other girls. And here comes this big, handsome guy coming in the front door of the Blue Bonnet. We were all sitting there drinking beer. And here he comes in with blowing a whistle. He'd been out with the little baseball kids. He had a bunch of kids playing baseball. And he and his roommate come whistling through there.
Do you remember his roommate's name?
I can't think of his name right off. What was his name? Anyway.
What year was this? Do you remember the year? 1960, 61?
Right around about that time.
59? 1950. Okay, I'm getting motions over 1959.
It's probably 1959. But he come blowing his whistle, and everybody got real excited, shook up in the Blue Bonnet, because they thought it was a raid. So he come, and the people that we were sitting around a big table, a bunch of beauticians and everything, knew him, but I didn't know him. I'd never seen him before. So he was sitting across the table from me, and we picked up on vibes on each other. And I thought, God, I really got to know that guy. Got to really, because he'd tell a joke, and but I'd catch him looking at me, and then when I'd look at him, he'd turn his head. And I thought, oh God, I wish that guy'd call me or something. But he finally did. He called me, and that's how I met your
Papa.
Papa.
Has Papa ever been married before?
No, he hadn't been married before, ever. He was 35 years old, but he never had been married.
Uh, how long did y'all date before you were married?
And we dated about a year and a half, Rodney, before we ever married. It was about a year and a half.
Where were y'all married?
We slipped off and went over to Borger.
Borger?
Borger, Texas.
Were you married in a church or by JP?
No, we went to a JP, and I had picked out my clothes. It was real funny. You're just not gonna believe this. We went down to Canadian. That's where you had to go get your license, your marriage license. And we came back, and I said, well, I thought really I ought to tell Carolyn. But yet Carolyn had come up to the house on a Sunday morning and caught Papa there. And she was kind of a little bit shook up. She thought he had spent the night with her mother. And really, he had. It was kind of funny. I mean, we had to sit up and watch TV all night, you know.
Yeah, we know.
But she was shook up because the man at Mr. Williams across the street had called Carolyn. And Guggy had said that he wasn't, really Guggy was, he was sharp. That was your...
I know Guggy.
Okay, but he had been up there, and I had talked to Guggy about him, but Mr. Williams across the street, he had called Carolyn and said, I see this green Mercury's out in front of your mother's driveway in the morning. Well, here comes Carolyn up there. Instead of taking her kids and going to church that morning, she came up there. And we laughed about it, no kidding, but we were up. I mean, we hadn't been really. She was.
You were married in Borger. Do you remember the day you were married and the year?
He really does get a big kick out of this because I usually forget her anniversary, but it was October the 14th. And I never can remember it. And
What year was it?
Your papa will say
1960? 1959.
1959.
Okay.
But when she came up there that Sunday morning, Ronnie, it was funny. I said, well, Carolyn, I meant to tell you, I just hadn't gotten around to tell you that we was married. And she said, well, Mother, I don't know when you was married. Do you have your marriage license?
And you really weren't married.
We got married right after that.
Right after that. Papa is considering retirement from Case International. How long has he worked for International Harvester? Or do you know how long he worked for International?
35 years.
35 years. When he retires, do you have any plans as far as what your future holds? Are you going to stay in Beaumont? Or?
No, we really don't want to stay in Beaumont, Rodney. We have thought about maybe moving back to Abilene, where, we have a little piece of land there.
Mm-hmm.
But we really hadn't made up our minds what we really are going to do.
Okay. You have 2 children. My mother, Carolyn Lavina, and my uncle, Robert Milton. Mother was a rather large child, as I've heard stories tell.
Yes, she really was.
She was...
she weighed 11 3/4 pounds, Ronnie, as you well know.
Was there anything strange about Mother growing up as a child, or were you harder on Mother than Robert, or?
No, really, I really wasn't.
I know their times were different.
Times were different then, but her father, he idolized her. He had by previous marriage, he had boys. And to him, and to the Dons, she was just a shining star for Uncle Jim. But there really wasn't any difference in those two children. I mean, she was spoiled by her H.O. And I'm sure Robert is spoiled by his...
Well, Mother was born September the 20th, 1935.
That's right.
Robert was born February the 8th, 1967 or 68. I don't remember exactly. He's 18 this past February.
Yeah, but he was born in 1968.
68.
No, not 68.
He was 18. Yeah, he'd been born in 68.
68.
86, right. I want to ask you some questions about how you named your children. I know you were named after your father. Where did Mother get her name? Carolyn Lavina.
Carolyn, the Lavina was after my mother's sister's children that she had kept. The Lavina was. But Carolyn was named Mama. My mother wanted to name her Carolyn.
I see.
Because when she was born, like I said, she weighed 11 3/4 pounds. She had curly hair, and she looked like Shirley Temple. And believe me, I'm telling you that when we took her out of the hospital, she had a Shirley Temple hat. And Aunt Esty is guilty. I know she stole it from me. But they brought her to see me, and she had ribbons in her hair. And she did look like Shirley Temple. But they wanted to name her Carolyn. But she was named Carolyn Lavina after Miss Lavina. But you talk about somebody that was beautiful. She was. Everybody in the hospital was had a fit.
Okay. Robert Milton. I know the Milton is Papa's middle name. James Milton. Is there anything significant about the name Robert? Why you named him Robert?
We named him Robert after Robert Hampton, because Dr. Hampton delivered him.
I see. Okay, well that's...
And he was a very special kid to that doctor, so we named him Robert. Milton after his dad.
Do you know or have any recollection as to how my grandfather, H.O., came about the name H.O.? How did he get the name H.O.?
He was named after his father. His name was Harold Oscar, and you named him H.O.
Oh, I see.
Because you were little, and you named him H.O. You called him H.O., and he went by H.O. all the time after that. But when we brought you back from California, we had stopped through Salt Lake City to fix you milk. And the salt in that milk, when we got you home, you was sick from drinking that salty milk. And H.O. put a string on his toe and put it through your bed and rocked you until you went to sleep. But you named him H.O. because his name was...
Well, I wasn't aware of that. I was handed that question.
Yeah.
Do you feel you were overly strict with Mother as a child? Or did she pretty well have her own way?
Carol and Lavina had a really... I always thought she was going to take me to Hollywood, really. And she did have chances to go. But I gave her dancing. She had dancing. See, I was really young when I had her, and she was just like a doll. But I gave her dancing. I gave her alphabet, you know, toe dancing. Used to take her down. Her daddy used to take her down to the NCO club, and she danced for the people at the NCO club. But, no, I really don't think she had a strict life.
Let's go back a few years prior to that, or back to your early years as a child. You have been called a mischievous child. You were a rebel rouser, I guess you would say. Do you have any incident that stands out in your mind? I've got notes here, question mark about a hayloft. What's the story behind that?
Rodney, I really wasn't. I guess I really was a mischievous child, maybe. But my mother used to say I was a lot like my dad, and I guess it really was. But when the Mullins boys that lived across the street from us, I will never forget it if I live. And Verna Mullins said every time that he and Ernest, anybody sees them, they want to know, you know, where I'm at, you know, and they'd like to see me. But they used to always like to get up in, you know, we had this hayloft where we always stacked hay. And we used to play, and Mr. Mullins had boys, he didn't have any girls, he just had boys. And we'd get up there and Papa would tell us to never mess with that hay up there. But we'd get up there and push the hay bales down. Was a loft built up, you know. And what we'd do, we'd take these big bales of hay and just push it down through the loft. And, you know, it would fall down into the loft. Well, then they'd always say, well, they didn't do it. They'd go home and they'd say, and Mr. Mullins would say, hey, you know, what'd you do? Go over there and get Lewis's hay down out of the hayloft and push it down. We didn't do it. We didn't do it. Vernie done it. They'd say Vernie. They couldn't say Verna. They'd say Vernie.
Did you get in trouble?
I always get in trouble for things I do. But Papa used to say, well, you know, now Dana, she means good, you know. She's just the boy that I wanted to be a boy. He really wanted a boy when he had me, and I was on. I guess. That's what Esty and all of them said I was.
Well,
that was like Kenneth when Kenneth was born on my birthday. You know, and they didn't even want, when Kenneth was born and he was born on my birthday, well, Esty said I'd go down and stay with Esty, and she'd, you know, I'd want to really do away with Kenneth. You know, I didn't want him to be down at Esty's house. But they'd always say, well, here comes that Vernie, you know. Yeah, jeez.
Well, you were speaking earlier of a story about dinner time at the Holderfield table, and
Oh,
I can picture in my mind Grandpa and Grandma Olderfield and 7 kids, little ones all the way up to the large ones, the grown ones. And probably by the time the babies got here, Aunt Esty and Uncle Archie were pretty much out on their own.
they were. They had, they were married, and Archie had, and
Mhm.
Esty had kids, but they'd all come home.
Mhm.
I mean, you couldn't believe our table. It would just be like a great big harvest table. And at that time, we had, oil field workers, and Mom would cook for them.
Why was it that you were set between Leon and Uncle Leon and Aunt Tommy?
Because they were always monkeying and, cutting monkey shines. And they'd put them between me, and we'd start, it was a general thing that we had prayer. Now that was one thing that we did was, it was prayer. We didn't eat if we didn't say grace. And Leon, if we laughed, we'd have to leave the table. And Leon would be on one side of me and Tommy would be on the other. And here'd be Esty and them and their kids. And Faye, and Vera was always there, but she was that little Miss Prish, that kind of sat there, and never did anything really wrong. And then when Papa would start to say grace, Leon would get me on one side of the leg, and then Tommy would grab me on the other, and I'd get tickled, and we'd all start giggling about the halfway time through Papa's prayer at the table. And they'd make me get up and leave. I'd have to leave the table. They wouldn't. And then they'd laugh. But if we laughed at the table, we had to leave. So they'd pinch me on the table, or, I'd kick them or something to leave me alone. I'm sure you probably went through the same thing. Kids do, I think.
We've heard stories about you in the school bus. Fill us in on that story.
Esty and Faye and Esty and Mama were always going to Shawnee. And they leave the kids home for me to take care of.